Genshin Impact has introduced a lot of new 5-star characters, and many of them are great. Since Genshin is also cycling through previous characters at a relatively fast rate, we'll definitely get the chance to pull for many returning characters. So what I'll do is break down the top 3 characters I think every person should consider having. Just to be clear, this isn't a tier list or anything. Every character has strengths and weaknesses, which is why this game is so fun. Just because I don't recommend a certain character doesn't mean they are horrible or worse than the ones I mentioned. For example, Ganyu is a strong DPS character, but there are some weaknesses that may hinder players, so these suggestions are units I find the most helpful for everyone. There isn't any order to this since I'm basically recommending you getting all 3 if possible.
This is order.
So first up, starting with Zhongli, who is currently up right now, so here's your chance to get him. There's a reason why people joke around and say Genshin is on easy mode when using Zhongli. It's because he's one of the best, if not the best, shielder in the game. He's also one of the easiest characters to use. Drop his shield with his pillar and throw a Tengai Shinsei at enemies when ready. Very simple, his shield scales with his HP and the duration is pretty long. You can actually have his shield up forever if it doesn't break, since you can always reapply his shield when ready, so the uptime is very high. In regards to his pillar, a small shockwave will consistently occur, which is great for some extra damage. If possible, keep the fighting next to the pillar since enemies would typically chase after you. Zhongli can also decrease both elemental and physical resistance on enemies, which is quite helpful and is something players sometimes forget. Zhongli does synergize well with other Geo users who can create Geo constructs. Geo MC, Albedo is actually one of the best allies to have, thanks to his consistent tick damage, dealing about 15 to 20k each tick, Ningguang or Ito. This is most beneficial when using his tenacity artifacts, as it'll cover a larger range for the buff. Key note, place your second Geo construct within range of the pillar, as it won't resonate if it's placed too far. Zhongli's Meteor is his main attack. The petrification will last around 3 to 4 seconds, though it may sound short, it really gives you some breathing room when needed. Obviously, the petrification won't work on bosses. There are 2 builds you can focus on, a sub DPS where you sacrifice shield strength for more burst damage, or support where you concentrate on shield strength. Most, however, lean towards a combination of both, more so the sub DPS side because his shield strength is still strong without having all HP artifacts equipped. You want to give him a decent amount of crit rate and damage unless you're going for pure shield support. Homa is the best thanks to the HP boost and scaling attack based on health, not to mention crit damage substats. I don't have it, but if you use Zhongli a lot, consider the Homa when it eventually returns. One of the best artifacts is the Tenacity of Millilith and is great with C1 Zhongli since he can create 2 pillars, but you're still fine with 1. For more burst damage, use Nobilis and the Geo artifacts. Just make sure to equip HP Sands because his damage and shield scales with his max HP. Some players may use all HP artifacts, which is great because the shield is practically unbreakable, but his burst won't hit for much. So one thing to consider is that Zhongli may not be the strongest damage dealer in comparison to other DPS units. Planet Pitfall does decent damage, ranging around 60k to a little over 100k, depending on your build, but he isn't a DPS unit, which is a flaw, especially in Spiral Abyss, where you need fast and consistent high damage to 3-star everything. Zhongli is a more defensive unit, so if you lack effective DPS, he isn't really going to help you in that area. I mean, don't get the wrong idea, dealing over 100k per burst isn't something to laugh about, and with only 40 energy cost, you're going to use it quite frequently, so he's a great sub DPS. But the thing to keep in mind is that the shield he offers will also allow you to go crazy with attacks without being staggered by hits, needing to dodge or heal. So you're saving a lot of time from performing unnecessary actions like dodging, like I said, and for you to concentrate purely on attacks is a great asset to have. He is boring to use though, I won't lie, but if you don't have him yet, definitely pull for Zhongli if you can. Like, he's so universal, being able to fit into any team, offers a lot with very little flaws. He's totally worth the Primogems. Unless you're saving for the Fox waifu, then screw him, waifus are eternal! Speaking about eternal,
Inazuma shines eternal!
this is just a quick honorable mention. Technically not on the list, so you don't have to get her like the ones I'm recommending, but she's still pretty damn good. I would consider her if you have the extra gems. Now, she isn't as broken as Zhongli, and damage in comparison to other high-ranking DPS is lower. Also, electro reactions isn't the strongest as in comparison to, let's say, Pyro or Hydro. But if you have enough money or Primogems, going for C2 Raiden Shogun is a different story cause her ignoring 60% enemy defense is pretty damn good, making her one of the strongest DPS in the game. But even at C0, she's still decent. We've been seeing more Shogun being used on recent Abyss. One reason, not the only reason, but one reason she's strong is because of the national team, which everyone should have by now or at least prioritizing getting. Zhongli was free when you started the game. You could have chosen her or Xingqiu during the Lantern Festival, and Bennett was on the shop once, but if you don't have them, get them as fast as possible. The combination of recharging and spamming burst allows insane amount of damage and consistent damage. She can also increase ally burst damage as well. You can also easily hit over 100k with her initial burst attack, not to mention constant vape damage. Crazy thing, you can repeat this with relatively short downtime. Now, if you're a Eula fan, Shogun is one of the best allies for her because her E skill can easily trigger Superconduct, raising physical damage. Some ER assistants will also help Eula use her bursts more frequently, and we all know how hard those can hit. Quick tip in terms of gameplay, start the fight with Shogun's skill, use everyone's burst, then skill again, then use her burst while in her burst states. For highest damage combo, do 3 normals, then charge attacks, and repeat 3 times, then do 4 normals. Easier combo, but slightly less damage, and the one I much prefer is 3 normal attacks, then charge, repeat 3 times, then 2 normal, and charge. It's a little bit more forgiving, but if you're using a national team, I typically just spam normal attacks because the main damage is vape, and you want to spam Xingqiu's swords as much as possible, which only works with normal. But yeah, Shogun, she's pretty good. Mine's at C0 and she's been very helpful. She's actually one of my main characters, but again, she's just an honorable mention, and her banner is coming up, so perfect timing to get her.
Kamisato art. Sumetsu.
Now, I do recommend Ayaka, who is one of the strongest burst damage dealers in the game. She's also very easy to build, all thanks to the Blizzard set and Cryo Resonance. With those two combined, it'll give you a 35% extra crit rate, allowing more flexibility on your stats. Not to mention freeze builds will give you an extra 20%. So some of you may wonder, why not Ganyu? Why Ayaka over her? Ganyu is way superior in charge damage, no doubt about it, but some of Ganyu's weaknesses does cause slight inconveniences for players. For one, charge shot interruptions really hurts you. It takes time to attack with her, and if you dodge or get hit, then that time is wasted. Another is aiming. Mobile players will have challenges doing this, and if enemies move or you miss, again, time is wasted. The good thing about Ayaka is she doesn't have these problems and is far superior than Ganyu in burst damage. Her burst hits 19 times and will hit for about 10k per hit without buffs aside from her dash, meaning you're hitting close to 200,000 off of one burst, which can be spammed. And the thing is, you're not just gonna sit there and watch the pretty numbers. You're going to use her skill and regular attacks while her burst is in effect, so even more damage in a short amount of time. Better yet, with teams and buffs, she's hitting over 20k, even more per hit, so we're talking about 300 to 400k per burst. And remember, she can spam her burst if you have the right build. She's also amazing for traveling, allowing you to move on water like Mona. So who needs a boat? Actually, she's better than Mona since she can freeze the water and stand on it to recover stamina. And another thing, Ayaka's skill can hit pretty well as well. Now, her normal attacks are on the weaker side, and this is where she falls short in comparison to Ganyu, who can hit like 50k with one full charge shot attack. But think of it this way, the added bonus damage from her burst and skill are her main weapons, not her normal. Her normal is more of an extra damage. Best combo for Ayaka is 2 normal attacks and then charge, or 3 normals and then charge for slightly less damage. Her whole combo is dash into enemies, use the cryo buff, use burst, then skill the normals. So listing the reasons why everyone should get her is, Ayaka is relatively easy to build, has a lot of stat flexibility because you aren't wasting it on crit rate. Instead, you can focus on crit damage, attack percentage, or ER. She has one of the strongest and most powerful bursts in the game, and she's a character who's relatively easy to use. She's also amazing in freeze teams, and melt teams is pretty fun. And of course, we can't forget she's great for exploration and good for traveling. DPS units in general is a bit more challenging to recommend since there's a lot of variety in them. For example, Hu Tao is Genshin's best single target, Eula's burst deals insane damage, Ganyu's charge shot is great, Zhao's plunge damage is amazing as well, but Ayaka has a lot going for her with very little weakness. So if you don't have her, she's most likely coming up soon with her big bro, and I highly recommend Ayaka.
Fallen leaves, adorn my night!
Kazuya is one of the best supports in Genshin Impact. There is an argument that if you already have C6 Sucrose, then you can skip him, but I disagree. No doubt Sucrose is amazing, but Kazuya is also great and is actually a character used quite often in Abyss. So Kazuya will fit into any reaction-based team and can be an elemental enabler, working especially well with Vape, Melt, and Freeze teams. His elemental burst gets infused with an element and will remain active till it's gone. An example is using Bennett's Burst to create a Pyro Cyclone in which you can use Hydro attacks for Vape. Keep in mind, there is a priority list as to which elements gets infused. For Kazuya, it's Pyro first, then Hydro, Electro, and Cryo being the least prioritized. This means, for example, if there is a Pyro and Hydro slime that you're fighting at the same time, the Pyro element will be infused. This means you'll also have to be aware of the element's presence in battle. Another great thing about Kazuya is that he also has some CC in battle thanks to his skill. Not as crazy as Venti for example, but it certainly helps bring enemies to you. As with all NMO users, make sure to infuse enemies with an element for swirl damage, and Viridescent artifacts are a must for Kazuya, allowing you to shred elemental resistance for a specific element. I mean, you can certainly have fun with an Animo DPS Kazuya, but the most optimal build is using all EM artifacts. EM build will out-damage the typical DPS crit build if there are 2 enemies being hit with his swirl. So more damage with the EM build, less demanding since swirl doesn't crit, but don't get me wrong, getting your crit up isn't a bad move, just not a priority. ER should be your priority for continuous elemental burst usage. The most important thing is that Kazuya is a great support for increasing elemental stat for your team to whichever the element he used in his swirl, and with low cooldown on his skill, he can swirl different elements in relatively short amount of time. So in order to really abuse his buff, you're going to have to be aware of your rotations. So as an example of the buff, Zhongling's Pyro stats is 46.6%, same with Bennett. Upon using a Pyro swirl, Zhongling's Pyro bonus was raised to 97.5%, which is quite a lot, and this can be abused with his skill since, again, it only has 6-second cooldown when tapped or 9 seconds when held. You'll be constantly rotating to boost allies' elemental damage. Now, the one mistake I see people say is that Kazuya's normal attack talent is completely useless and you should ignore it. I mean, I agree it's not a priority for a EM Kazuya build, but it still increases the plunge damage when using his skill, which you'll be using a lot. So yes, it has less priority, but I wouldn't neglect it since it is free damage, maybe leveled up to 6. In the end, you have a character who can increase elemental damage significantly, is a pretty decent sub DPS, and has slight crowd control. He's a great substitute elemental enabler. This does mean you shouldn't have a main enabler, but Kazuya can help. Very flexible with sub-stats since EM builds you're not focusing on crits, and his weapon choice is pretty easy. Iron Sting is craftable, and yet it's one of the best and most amazing free weapons for him. Now, one of the biggest problem with Kazuya, however, is that EM Viridescent artifact farming is horrendous. Stats actually show obtaining a 5-star EM goblet or headpiece is one of the lowest chances in the game. You can be farming for 4 months or longer and not receive a single EM Viridescent artifact. I know many had to settle with a 4-star, myself included. Another issue is your rotations. Each team will require different timing for Kazuya, but honestly, I wouldn't really worry too much about it. Even with sloppy rotations, you'll still 3-star Abyss with the right team. In the end, Kazuya is one of the best supports and will definitely help all players. So in the end, keep in mind, go for characters you like since everything aside from Abyss is pretty easy. Though it's okay to prioritize meta characters too, since it'll make life easier, and who doesn't like using strong ass characters? An important thing to remember is that playstyle is also important, and we all have a different playstyle. I know some people who absolutely hate using Albedo, although he's pretty easy to use, but I do know some players who don't really like using him in battle. Ganyu, Hu Tao, and so on. Sometimes characters and how they play doesn't really match with the person's style, But these 3 are the characters that you should definitely get, as they offer a lot with relatively few drawbacks. So, comment down below to let me know which character you're going after this year. Doesn't have to be these 3, well, technically 4 since I did mention Shogun as an honorable mention with the national team, but I want to know who you're going after. As always, if you like this video, hit that thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for future Genshin Impact videos. Good luck on your summons, everyone. I hope you win the 50-50. I hope you get the character you want. Yae Miko is coming up soon, and of course, Kamisato Ayato. He looks freaking badass, so best of luck to you all.